Hello, this is Kevin with Banggood Inc. And today I'd like to challenge you to a bid day math challenge. So I've seen all sorts of posts up before with people giving math equations for people to solve and so forth. And this is not going to be, that complicated. We're not really talking about, does multiplication and division come first and what's the order of the parentheses and things of that nature. Most of this is all going to be, what an estimator does day in, day out. And also give people kind of a vision of just kind of how complicated that process could be with all the different combinations. So a lot of it's just going to be adding numbers together. But the different combination in numbers and how many numbers is what kind of makes it a complicated task, and also, checking the bids for accuracy and things of that nature. So what I would like to do here is I'm going to bring up a spreadsheet of some numbers. So basically what we've got going on here is I've got 10 subs going across the top. I've got 5 scopes of work that I want to compare for completeness. So what I would like you to do is pause the video and take a few minutes to answer these questions. So basically, assuming that all these bids were complete, what's the low combination of these bids? How many different subs are you using to obtain that low bid? Now, one thing I'll kind of clarify is some of these have, a number for pretty much each spec. Some of them just have certain sections. And some of these are combinations. So this one here is, $24,000, but to do both those scope of work, or $67,000 to do, the entire scope. So pause the video, take a few minutes, and come up with what you think the low solution to this is. So now what I want to do is I want to take a look at building this and figuring out what the low combination is. And there's some faster ways of doing it that I'll talk about in future, I'll probably do a couple other variations of this math challenges, kind of add more detail to some of the different scope that we'll be looking at here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my bid metrics. So bid metrics is basically Sage Estimating's cloud version that'll be their full-fledged estimating system at some point. As far as today goes, what I'm going to focus on is the analysis part of, comparing bids, knowing who's complete, selecting lows, things of that nature for the project. So I'm going to go ahead and just do this pretty much from scratch. I do want to go back and pull this estimate up, or this sample, and kind of move this to another screen so I can look at it at the same time. And I'm going to go ahead and say I want to create a new project. So I'm going to go ahead and just say that this is my and I'm just going to put some information in here to kind of get me started. And at this point, that's all I'm going to really just set up. So I'm just getting enough to get a project started. So I'm going to go and say create. Here's my bid day math challenge bid that we just started. So I'm going to go into it, and it wants to know what am I going to use for my grouping of data as far as my bid room goes. So when we analyze bids, we kind of group things into what's considered a bid package as far as, what types of bids might come in together. So if I go back and kind of take a look at this spreadsheet that we're looking at there, all of this is going to be on one bid grid because I've got a combination of some people bidding a lot of things, some people just bidding pieces of it and things of that nature. So as far as bid grid goes, I'm just going to set up one bid grid for this example. And this is going to be my phases of work that I want to check scope on. So as I notice here, I'll see that I've got one called bid metrics and one called bid phase that I'm going to use for, just the terminology here. So I'm going to get started. I don't have anything in my bid at the moment yet. So in this case here, I'm just going to go ahead and tell it that I want to add a new bid package. And let's just say insulation, framing, okay, and painting. And in this case, I'm just going to have one bid metrics. just to kind of show that math example and what the answer would be and so forth. So as I look under my base bid here, I'll see that particular bid grid that I've started. And this basically brings up the bid grid where I'm going to analyze those different numbers. So the first thing I want to do is I want to get all my different scopes in here of what I'm going to check on completeness for. So I'm going to go ahead and say that I've got a 7210. And all I did is hit enter there. Hang gypsum wall board. Finish the gypsum wall board. And I think I had a painting in there. Okay, so there were the 5 levels of scope that I wanted to check for completeness and so forth. I'm going to crunch these up just a little bit here. And in this example, I'm not really using any quantities or categories or budget estimates. In a future one, we'll kind of talk about where that comes into play and so forth. So right now, I just want to get my subs in there. So I'm going to go ahead and say add subs. And basically, we had walls above the rest was in there. We had Heartland. Alpha. Rockers. I'm going to put Rockers in there twice because we had 2 different bids from Rockers. Now, as I'm going through there, this is just going through and looking through my current subcontractor list to basically show me the different companies that are in my address book. If I were to just type in a name and click on the name, it would also let me create a new one on the fly. So there's a lot of times when, people are receiving bids and things of that nature that I may not know, who's bidding sometimes and so forth until the last minute. So pretty easy to add new one as I need to. So these are all be things that typically, an estimator would have all in a scope, or at least kind of broke off ahead of time, since a lot of time, that we have a rough idea who's giving us bids up front. Okay, so let's go ahead and start with this for a moment then, and I'm going to crunch this up a little bit so I can get a little bit more on the screen. So basically I've got the scope that's being bid, and I've got my bidders going across the top. So the first one in our example was kind of this one, so I'm just going to move them over here to kind of keep it somewhat similar. So, as I come in here, I just enter the prices of, what the bids were. So in the unrealistic world, every bidder, it'd be nice if they gave me, what the price was on each one like this. So in this case here, that's my lowest combination because that's the only one it knows so far. So, I've got all these numbers entered and so forth for each individual scope. It all adds up to $147,000 is, what it knows at this point. As I come in and put other subs in there, it's common not to necessarily know all the prices because a lot of subs don't perform all the exact same scope. So in this case here, Heartland only does these 2 sections of scope. So now you'll notice that it's basically automatically come up with 146 as my low combination, which is a combination of what you see in green so far. So basically it's using, all the prices here, and it's basically using this price here because it beat out the 16,000. So as I'm going through here, it's just trying to come up with what the low combination of the bids are, getting me, all the scope being, kind of analyzed here. So on my installation, I'm going to say 4,500. And then we had Rockers. Let's put Rockers over there. And Rockers had 16,500. and 9,000. Now, Rockers gave me 2 bids because they gave me a price for each one of these separate. So for each one of these sections separate, they said they'd be $16,500 or $9,000, but they also gave me a price of $24,000 to include both scopes. So that way, if they get awarded both areas of work, they'll give us a little bit of a discount by giving us both portions of that contract and so forth. So in this case here, you notice that it's now using the insulation from one company. It's using the, framing from someone else, Rockers to do all the hanging and finishing, and this one here to do the painting. So as I come through here then, and let's go ahead and complete the rest of this. So let's say ABC painting. We had, whoops, Rainbow Paints was before them. And then we got bills, and Bill gave me a complete, just one number to do everything. So 67,000. And includes all scope. And let's say I got Sue's framing then. And the edge framing was okay. So basically, one of our questions was, in analyzing those bids, what was a low combination? So when you look at the full picture of this, it wasn't a very complicated task. There's only 5 levels of scope, only 10 bidders. This is a very, very basic compared to, what, some large bids could have, and with the number of bidders and the amount of scope and things of that nature. And as I look through here, I can see that the low combination at the moment is $64,000. To get that $64,000, I'm using 5 subs. So that was one of the questions, was what was a low combination? So the low combination in my case is $64,000 by using, Alpha for the insulation, and Sue's for my framing, and edge framing for the hanging, and Rockers for my finishing, and, Rainbow Paints for my painting. As I look at this information, you'll start to see inconsistencies in bids sometimes. So as I look at my hanging, I'll notice that, 16,000, 15,000, 16,000, 13,000, maybe that price concerns me a little bit. So as I go through here, I'm just going to say that I want to exclude it. So now you notice that the system came up and it says, okay, $64,000 is still the low combination, but right now, because of any conditions I've got on, $66,000 is the low because it's increased $2,000 because that bid was $2,000 lower than, my next combination. So this might be a place where I want to go back and put a note on here, something of that nature, and ask somebody to, come back and give that company a call and so forth, and verify to see, how competent they are of their bid, and double check their scope with them and make sure if there's anything missing and so forth. So let's say in this case here, we went off, we've done our phone call, and yep, we found out that something was missing. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up a little bit. And I'm going to tell it that I want to add a supplement to this. So basically what this has done then is my initial bid was $13,000. Any additional supplements right now, okay, I'm going to say that is going to be $1,500. So now you'll notice that the original bid was $1,300. Their current, add that I needed to add to it is another $1,500. So it's made their new bid up to $14,500. It's got a little arrow here to note that that's been increased or decreased by some sort of adjustment. And then it's always probably a good idea too, if I go back in here and add notes, and if I said something of So I'm just going to say after a phone call, we found a widget was missing from this bid and we need to add it to the bid. So now as I go back through here, there's a little white triangle up here to let me see that I've got some sort of note on there. And now maybe after doing that review, maybe I feel comfortable enough to go ahead and, I'm going to undo the excluded so that it'll go back into the mix of if it's low, it'll get it type of thing. So there, now it's went ahead and it's found a new combination with that adjustment being made. And down here, I can also tell that, I had to add supplement of $1,500 to their bid. So I had to add about 3%. So there again, when somebody's trying to analyze risk or make sure that some of the bids are complete, that might be a factor of, I'd rather deal with, this company that I don't have that, a bunch of supplemented dollars to and things of that nature. So the next challenge is looking at this. What would be the low combination? This is using 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 subs. What would it look like if I wanted to use 3? So over here, I could say, limit my subcontractors to 3. So it'll basically tell me that my absolute low is still $65,500. Because of the conditions I've got currently is $66,300 now. So as you notice, it's now just using the rockers bids, and I'm going to minimize that so that way they're closer again. So it's picked up my rocker bid there, that one, and those two. So now I'm using 3 subs, and I'm leaving, $800 on the table to do that. So that's where, some people go back and analyze and figure out, it's in our best interest to write, contracts to include more of the scope than deal with more subs sometimes. So that way I can kind of look at what the risk would be as far as, rolling that up. Or, maybe if I want to do 2 subs. So in this case here, I'd be adding $1,500. And in this case here, it didn't find a low combination of 2 more than just 1. So like in this case here, it says bills complete is, the cheapest combination of 2 or less. But I'm paying, $1,500 premium by not working with as many subs on this job. So just a rough little example, just a little math class or math challenge and so forth. How'd you do? Did you get the right numbers? Did you, miss a low combination and things of that nature when you put yours together? So if your process, what's your process for bidding look like and analyzing bids? Can you come back to a project a year from now, a month from now, and figure out exactly, what combination you used, or see notes somewhere that might tell me that, I've supplemented this bid and maybe I could go in here and see a note that would tell me, why we made this adjustment or things like that? Maybe, there's clients that, at the heat of the moment, once they get a lot of information in these grids, they might look at other bids and say, yep, that won't beat what I've got in here. This won't beat what I got in here. And they don't even put the bids in because of, rush. Is there a good reason to put those bids in at a later point? Sure there is. So in a lot of cases, it's handy that even after I get done with bid day, I turn in the bid to go back and enter the other bidders into here sometimes. Why is that? If you get awarded the job, put the bidders back in and do one more analysis before you start buying the project out. Make sure that you did come up with the lowest combination. Was there another bidder that I should have used that I didn't have time to, oh shoot, yeah, I missed that number or anything of that nature. So even those can bring in benefit. Hope you found this challenge a little fun, and let me know what do you currently use to analyze your bids. Thanks for watching.